Over time, investors have pondered the possibility of the devaluation of the United States dollar. Since the early 2000s, the global economic landscape has undergone significant shifts, the most notable of which has been the rise of China as an economic superpower over the last 2 decades, prompting some countries to contemplate trading oil without using the petrodollar. So, let's try to picture what would take place if the value of the US dollar suddenly collapsed. The United States dollar is the world's reserve currency, yet it is not immune to the possibility of its value plummeting. The following are some of the potential variables that might lead to the depreciation of the value of the dollar. Government spending. As a reaction to the epidemic, the federal government of the United States has spent billions of dollars, which has contributed to an increase in the country's overall debt. If the government keeps spending at this pace, it might result in a default on the debt, which would have a catastrophic effect on the dollar's value. A rise in the interest rate. If interest rates were to increase, it would make borrowing money for the United States government a more costly proposition. This might result in a default on the debt, or it could compel the government to decrease expenditure, which would hurt the economy. Inflation. Inflation is a further issue that could potentially contribute to the depreciation of the dollar's value. Suppose inflation remains unchecked for an extended time. In that case, it will eat away at the dollar's value, making it a less desirable option to use as a reserve currency. A weakening of the dollar would bring about a variety of unfavorable outcomes for the economy of the United States. Importing products and services would become more costly for companies, increasing consumer costs. It would also make it more difficult for the government of the United States to borrow money, which would restrict its capacity to react to jolts in the economy. A weakening of the dollar would have repercussions not just for the economy, but also for politics in addition to those economic effects. It would result in the United States having less influence across the globe, and it would cause people to lose faith in the government of the United States. However, some of the most significant things to take into consideration are those that were discussed earlier. If these variables continue to worsen, it might lead to a drop in the dollar's value, which would have a substantial influence on the economy of the United States and the economy of the rest of the world. The consequences of having an unsustainable level of US debt. The national debt of the United States presents a significant challenge to the role of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. The interest on the national debt was paid off using 7.4% of the total amount of tax revenue collected by the federal government in 2022. However, interest rates were still hovering around record lows throughout that period. 1 year later, the interest rate has increased at a rate that is the quickest on record for any increase. This indicates that more money collected via taxes will be devoted to paying down interest accrued on the debt. Worse yet, as the debt levels continue to soar, a gravitational force is increasing that pushes the dollar's value downward. The widening gap in the United States trade deficit is another element that hastened the dollar's decline. When the United States spends more money on imported items than it earns from exports, this indicates that the country is running a trade deficit. This lowers the value of the dollar in comparison to other currencies, which results in the dollar's depreciation. Also, the number of people able to work decreases as the population as a whole ages. Because of this, there are fewer individuals to manufacture products and services, which might contribute to price increases in the marketplace. As a result, inflation might further contribute to the dollar's decline in value. China, which has the world's second largest economy in the world, is progressively showing its might and posing a challenge to the supremacy of the United States. As China's faith in the United States government continues to erode, it is selling off its holdings of US government bonds. This is evidence that China no longer regards the dollar as a reliable currency to use as a safe haven. The erosion of confidence in the United States government will inevitably result in a weakening of the appeal of the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. And the further depreciation of the dollar may have a considerable influence on the economy of the United States. Companies would have to pay more for their imports, resulting in higher costs for their end customers. It would also hurt the value of US assets, such as equities and bonds. In a nutshell, the United States national debt poses a significant challenge to the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency. And if the debt continues to increase at its current rate, the consequences of the US economy might be catastrophic. If it were to lose its role as the reserve currency of the world, what impact would it have on financial markets? Most Americans cannot grasp the consequences, although history gives some pointers. During the time of the Weimar Republic, hyperinflation destroyed the value of the German mark, resulting in millions of people's impoverishment. In Venezuela, the bolivar currency has likewise been so depreciated that it is now worth less than the equivalent amount of toilet paper. A decline in the dollar's value would have the same impact on the economy of the United States. Wages would be unable to keep up with the expansion of assets, the middle class would be squeezed, and the number of people living in poverty would increase. Additionally, there would be a rise in crime. Given these circumstances, there is likely to be increased support for protectionist and isolationist policies. People would be less likely to trade with those in other nations, leading to a more fragmented economic landscape worldwide. The demise of the dollar's dominance as the world's reserve currency would be a momentous occasion with far-reaching repercussions. It would be a threat to the hegemonic might of the United States, and it would make the globe a place filled with greater uncertainty. The roots of the falling value of the US dollar. The United States government responded to Russia's invasion of Ukraine by imposing severe economic sanctions on the country. It was hypothesized that restricting commercial commerce would make the Russian interior more vulnerable. Putin's solution was to abandon the usage of the US dollar in favor of the euro and the yuan as other forms of currency. However, one consequence that received very little attention was the sanctions' impact on the ruble. Because of the restrictions that were put on payments made in rubles, Russia could no longer comply with the legal requirements necessary to make payments on certain of its debt commitments. This resulted in the cancellation of debt, although indirectly, which led to a significant strengthening in the ruble. A currency whiplash had happened, in which the purpose of lowering the ruble resulted in the exact opposite event than what was intended to happen. The dollar is the currency suffering the most due to these sanctions, since sovereign adversaries are making arrangements to do business in currencies other than the US dollar. As the era of the dollar's dominance draws to a close, it is crucial to have an asset base that is as robust as is practicable, and the value of real assets tends to remain relatively stable throughout time. The only change is the normal price at which they are traded. If you can get your hands on more physical assets, you will be in a better position to protect yourself against the adverse impacts of rapid inflation. After all, there is a good reason why Bill Gates is the greatest landowner in the United States. So, do you think the US dollar will collapse in the future? If so, what do you think is the best way for us to protect our own wealth? Join the conversation and let us know in the comments below. Did you learn something new today? I hope so. If you did, give this video a big thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also subscribe to the channel to avoid missing any of our future videos. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.